Hey guys, what's happening? So for this one, I wanted to go back and pick up our coverage of Ultimate X-Men because it is the only series connected to Earth 6160 that we haven't been covering regularly. And part of that's because when I dropped the first video, nobody watched it. But I've been enjoying the story thus far, so I figured at the least, what I'll do is just group together a few issues at a time to keep the playlist going alongside of everything else, because as it turns out, there's a really crazy story tucked away in here. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so first and foremost, it's been a while since we covered Ultimate X-Men, so really quickly I'm gonna do a little recap as far as what's taken place up to this point. And I mean, at the time we only covered one issue before taking a detour into the rest of the universe, because since we've been covering everything else, I didn't want to just leave this out. And I was also waiting for this story to reach a point where it started to feel like it's connecting to everything else that's happening on Earth 6160, and it wasn't until recently where I was like, okay, wait a minute. But as a quick recap, back in issue 1, this story started out with Hisako Ichiki, who for the most part was a normal kid. And I mean, she was a little awkward and got picked on, but she basically became this way after her close friend passed away. And so later when she got a cryptic note from someone telling her to meet them at the temple, Hisako went, only to arrive there and see her late friend Tsubasa, who appeared to be there and appeared to be not dead, only for her to see that this was someone who we referred to at the time as the Shadow Man. And I'm gonna stick to that for a little while. So for the time being, we're just gonna call him the Shadow Man. But while they're here, he ended up giving Hisako a charm, which bears a striking resemblance to the psionic exoskeleton armor of her 616 counterpart. But the thing that caught her off guard about receiving this charm from the Shadow Man was the fact that her late friend Tsubasa had at one point given her this same charm. So as expected, that freaked her out. And following this, when the Shadow Man went on to show Hisako her late friend hanging, the Shadow Man also went on to tell her that they're both responsible for Tsubasa's death. And we'll talk about what they meant by that in a little while. But after this whole experience leads to Hisako fleeing away on her bike, she nearly gets hit by a car, which is when her mutant power activated and saved her life. And later on, when she was confronted by the Shadow Man again, he appeared to her in the form of her late friend Tsubasa, telling her that it's too late. And that's when she gets a phone call where she finds out that Tsubasa's coach, who used to bully him, hung himself, which quickly becomes a pattern of how people die at the hand of the Shadow Man. And from here, going into issue 2, when we pick up with Hisako, we find her laying down and staring at a crack in the ceiling. And mind you, this is weeks after issue 1, because of how these different issues from the Ultimates universe, they all have this 1 month time gap in between them, unless they're focusing on a flashback or something of that sort. But with Hisako laying here and staring at the ceiling, this eventually leads to her dozing off, as we see this shadow substance crawl up the side of her face. But during this time, this dream that she has, or this memory that she's shown, depending on how you want to look at it, it takes her back to a time when she skipped school with Tsubasa, which I assume meant a lot to him since he's a kid that got bullied a lot, so he just wanted to get away from it. And on this particular day, he even told her that he was thinking of dropping out of school altogether. And her response at the time was like, that's kind of punk rock, which was neither getting into the reasons of why, or even starting a conversation to say like, okay, so what's the plan? Because it's like, okay, you want to drop out of school? Then what? Because that could at least lead in a positive direction. So by revisiting this moment, Hisako's just like, yeah, maybe I could have handled this moment better. But eventually this dream is interrupted when Hisako sees the sky go dark and a huge eye form above her, which is almost like she knows she's being watched. And it causes her to wake up from this dream with a note crumpled up in her hand. So later on that day, after she's had motorcycle riding class, to where after that she rode her bicycle to the store because her mom asked her to get some eggs on the way home. But then it's around this time when Hisako sees a silhouette approaching her. So at first she thinks it's the Shadow Man, only for Hisako to find out that it's someone asking her if she was the girl in that accident from 3 weeks ago. And this is where she met May, who also goes by the name Maystorm. And at first, Hisako lied about being in the accident. So to gain a little bit more trust, May pulls out this toy and she charges it with lightning from her hand as a way of showing Hisako that she has powers. And it works because now she's looking at May like, okay, this girl's a little weird, but maybe she's weird enough to think that Hisako's not crazy. So next, Hisako shows her the note she was given, which says, I'm waiting for you in the science lab of the abandoned school. Come to me. So the two of them end up going, and as they head to the abandoned school, Hisako tells May everything that's happened thus far. And she's surprised that May doesn't think she's crazy. And instead she tells Hisako she's a superhero, and that's cool. A superhero fighting a mysterious shadow. But as they're heading through this school that's been closed down for some time, May ends up stepping on something dark and squishy. But when she looks to see what it is and she picks it up, she finds it to be a wet stuffed doll. which like we saw, that's definitely not what it was seconds ago. And following this, they're then caught by a security guard who tells them that they can't be here, only for them then to hear a dripping sound coming from the next room. And when they go to check it out, they find 3 stuffed toys soaked in a dark, mysterious liquid just before the Shadow Man appears again, telling Hisako, "You know the 3 boys who bullied Tsubasa? You won't see them anymore. I wanted to let you know." So immediately Hisako tells Mei, that's him, that's the Shadow Man, just before turning to the security guard to let him know that the Shadow Man's a killer. But when she looks at the guard's face, it's made up of maggots. So immediately the 2 of them take off running. But while they're in the hallway, Mei stops. She turns around and she attacks this thing with wind, only for the Shadow Man to break through this body and continue to come at them. But when the Shadow Man goes for Hisako, she panics, activating her psionic armor, and she's able to defend herself. But unfortunately, in all the commotion, she destroyed the eggs that she was supposed to bring home to her mom. And just after this, when we see the dark substance lift from the abandoned school, we head over to another location where we find this mysterious guy in his closet, wearing a bucket on his head with a ton of tubes attached and some charms taped to it, with it almost looking like a homemade Cerebro setup. And we'll learn more about this guy as this continues, but right here, all we see as he opens the closet door is him look at a picture and say, "I know that girl from somewhere," as we see that it's a picture of Hisako just before he says her name. And right after this, we jump over to Hisako, who's currently attending the Iridori High School entrance ceremony, where she's thinking about the incident that happened at the abandoned school and how the Shadow Man told her that the 3 kids who were bullying Tsubasa would no longer be a problem. Because as it turns out, this morning she saw on the news that 3 kids from her old school were found hanging. But she knows they didn't do this to themselves, and she's afraid that the Shadow Man might come for her next. But it's not long before Hisako's cheered up for a moment here, because at the ceremony she finds out that her and Mei are going to be classmates. So they end up properly exchanging information, and Mei tells her that her full name is Mei Iragashi. And after this, going into issue 3, it's here where we head into a flashback that takes place 2 years ago at Hisako's middle school, where her and a couple other kids were playing Kokiri-san after class, which is like a Japanese version of a Ouija board game that you specifically play with a 10-yen coin. And at the time, Hisako's friend Sayaka, she thought Hisako was the one moving the coin, but Hisako was just like, "No, it's not me, I swear." And it's not until they're basically done playing the game where the 2 of them realize that neither of them knew the 3rd kid who was playing. And you'll notice here that this 3rd kid with the glasses, who does the little thing where he pushes them up, he just happens to look a lot like the kid that we saw back in issue 2 with a picture of Hisako. And after this, when we come back to what's the present day at this point, we see Hisako looking at a 10-yen coin, which is what brought back this memory for her to begin with. And right now, when we find Hisako and Mei in gym class, they're not really participating with the other kids, with the 2 of them being outsiders and all that. But while they're here, Mei shows Hisako her social thread, which is all about Tsubasa, and she points out that they identified the kids who were killed. And then she goes on to ask Hisako if she still has the Omamari, and Hisako tells her that she can't get rid of it, because even when she tries, it always just finds its way back. And so from here, Hisako goes on to ask Mei about her powers, which leads to Mei getting quiet for a moment just before we're shown a flashback that takes us into when her mutant powers first manifested. And this all started on the morning when Mei was having breakfast with her parents, when her mom told her on her way home from school she needs to stop by the neighbors and introduce herself. And at first Mei didn't want to do it, but she eventually agreed. So later on that day after school, when she was on her way, Mei came across a cute little stray cat that she picked up just outside of her neighbor's place. And when she goes to the door to see her neighbor, who at first appears to be this shadowy figure, as she gets closer, she sees that it's the same weird kid, and he's wearing the bucket on his head right now. And it's really interesting how the same charms that are on the bucket, they also appear on the cat's collar, as if he had been experimenting with the cat or something like that. But nonetheless, when Mei brings him the cat, this thing just freaks out, as if it never wanted to come back here. And as she hands it over, you see these symbols on the cat's back, much like the ones on the charms. But with the cat trying to hold on to Mei, it ends up scratching her. And as the weird kid takes it inside, he tells Mei, "Sorry, I'll discipline the cat." And when Mei leaves, we see that there's this black stuff on her arm where she was cut, which we see even more of later that night, coming from her cut with a little bit of electricity as well. And while she's sleeping, we see the Shadow Man just above, watching her, as the shadows start to cover Mei more and more. But she's suddenly woken up when she hears her parents downstairs arguing, just before they call her down to eat dinner. And when Mei gets down there, her mom is just yelling about how her dad won't answer her or even look at her. And this leads to Mei telling her mom that she should leave him, which from there causes things to get heated. And that's when Mei's dad got up and he hit her, which is what caused Mei's mutant power to manifest for the first time, with her screaming and creating a huge thunderstorm at the dinner table, leaving the place completely drenched. But we also learn here when this happened, this is also how Mei's eyes and her hair turned white. And to make this tense situation even worse, this is also when her father put her out on the street, all while being unusually calm as all of this went down. But heading back to the present day, this flashback is disturbed when Mei gets hit in the head with a ball during gym class that was kicked over by a girl named Nico Minoru, who's known to have come from a family of psychics, but we quickly realize that there's a bit more to it when she approaches Hisako and Mei and tells them, "Interesting, you two are mutants too," which lets them know that Nico's a mutant as well. And in issue 4, we pick up on a rainy school day with Hisako and Mei, where they see Nico reading this other kid's fortune who's wearing this hat with the bunny ears while using a crystal ball. And it has Hisako and Mei watching from a distance while trying to figure out if Nico really has powers or if she's faking it. But after school is over and Hisako gets ready to leave on her motorbike, since she has her license now, she sees a kid in a green coat, and at a quick glance she can't help but to think that she knows him from somewhere. But before this continues, we jump forward to later that evening once Hisako has reached home, and it's here where her mom tells her that she noticed a big scratch on her bike, and also that she heard about a kid named Amino who went to middle school with Hisako, who was really depressed about his 3 friends who'd recently passed away. And just to be clear, these are the 3 friends who were taken out by the Shadow Man, who were bullying Tsubasa. So when Hisako hears about Amino being depressed about their deaths, she rushes to grab her old middle school yearbook to see if the kid she saw after school earlier was Amino. And that's where she confirms that it was him. And when she sees this, it takes us back to earlier, and we find out that this kid grabbed Hisako, insisting that she knew information about his friends' deaths, which at the time freaked her out, so she took off on her bike. But she doesn't get far because something gets caught in her wheel and it causes her to crash, which is how she got the scratch on her bike that her mom was asking about. But when Hisako looks to see what it was, she sees the head of Tsubasa caught in the spokes, and that's when she realizes that the Shadow Man has possessed Amino. So Hisako gets back on her bike, and it's here where we learn that she's got much better at controlling her powers as she brings up her psionic armor and gets ready to race towards the Shadow Man, cause now it's not like she's running away. And the Shadow Man notices this change in Hisako, with her showing more confidence and control as he goes on to attack her with a ton of box cutter blades, but she manages to press through this attack and knock Amino back, creating quite a bit of distance between the two of them. But as she gathers herself and looks up at Amino, who's still completely under the Shadow Man's control, he gets up holding one of the blades to his neck, and he ends himself right in front of her. And to make things even worse, off to the side, a bunch of the other kids from Hisako's school, they're all watching this and recording on their phones. And that's when Mei steps out telling everyone to stop. And when they don't, she does what any good weather controlling friend would do, which is call up the lightning and fry everyone's phones as a way to protect Hisako and keep her powers a secret. But what they didn't notice is that someone else not too far away was also watching this and filming it. And as it turns out, this other someone is a little girl by the name of Noriko, aka Surge, who also has electric powers. So now Hisako's secret isn't as safe as she thought it was. And it's not too long before she finds out, because a few days later, while her and Mei are in class, Hisako's phone starts blowing up, only for her to find out that it's a video of her using her powers that's going viral. So right away, Mei is like, how is that even possible? Because she thought she'd fried everyone's phones. And just after this, heading into issue 5, it's here where a lot of the pieces start to come together. Because next, we learn that the strange kid we saw earlier, his name is Kageyama. And when we catch up to Kageyama here, he's watching an old video on his phone of Amino and his friends, when they all were alive, bullying Tsubasa. Which is where we also find out that it was always Amino's thing to carry around a box cutter and threaten people with it. And it's here where we find out that both Kageyama and Noriko both know each other. But we don't find out too much more beyond that, at least not at this point. Because at first Noriko's just asking him to fix her computer, so Kageyama's just like psychers, always breaking electronics. And we're also shown here that Noriko has a unique purple scar on her upper thigh that looks like lightning. But the conversation shifts here when Noriko asks about Hisako, and she accuses him of being a stalker. So he tells her that it's not like that, and him and Hisako went to middle school together. So then she accuses Kageyama of giving Hisako her powers, but he just laughs and tells her, not me, this time. But I do have some good secrets. So she then asks him to show her, only for him to tell her one day, just before he gets up to leave, while telling her that his friend is calling him and he has to go, leaving Noriko a bit frustrated that she didn't get to see these secrets. And just after this, when we head over to Hisako, who's in her room having a conversation with Mei, suddenly while they're talking, she hears the Shadow Man speak through Mei. As her appearance completely changes, the Shadow Man tells Hisako that he told her before he wanted them to be friends, and how the two of them are the same, since they have powers that normal people would dream of, and how together they could take over the world because they are superior. But it's not long before Mei gets Hisako to snap out of it, and we find out that the two of them are here with Nico, because Hisako was hoping that Nico could offer them some help, because Hisako was hoping that Nico could use her psychic abilities to read her Amamori and tell them more about the Shadow Man. So she ends up giving this a shot, but upon closer inspection, Nico smells the scent of blood on the Amamori, and in addition to that, she notices a symbol inside that looks like two circles with an X on top. But as she continues to do her reading and learn more about the charm, it suddenly starts to change and grow roots. So Nico tries to take a closer look at it with her magnifying glass, only for it to shatter and slice her on the face, just before more of that black liquid comes spewing out of the charm. And we see Kageyama back in his closet, saying, "Not yet, we need more time to get to know each other," referring to Hisako of course. And as we see the shadow emerge from Hisako's charm, Nico quickly grabs her book and she smashes it, only for it to push its way back out from underneath. So next she aims her broken magnifying glass at it, only for it to surprisingly extend and turn into like a magic scepter that blasts the shadow demon away. And when this happens, Nico comes to understand that this magnifying glass that her grandmother gave her, it made a blood pact when it cut her skin, and that's what caused the magic magnifying glass to turn into a scepter. And following this, we jump over to Noriko, who we find out is working as a companion. And for a moment here, a client crosses the line and he tries to touch the scar on her thigh. But before this happens, she places her hand on his head, which confuses him for a moment here, only to then shock the mess out of this guy and take all the money from his wallet before she leaves. And when she does, she walks past what looks to be a poster of Shiro Yoshida, the Sun Emperor from the Maker's Council, who are in charge of this region, and she just spits out her gum on it. And while she's out, she ends up passing right by Nico and Mei. And as they pass each other, there's a bit of this look that her and Mei more or less give one another. As Mei thinks to herself, she looks like trouble, and not the fun kind. But Mei doesn't think about it too much, because she goes on to ask Nico if she thinks that the Shadow Man is a mutant too. So Nico tells her that it's possible. So then Mei asks her if she thinks it was a good idea for them to leave Hisako alone after everything that's happened. So Nico just tells Mei Hisako's not a child, and if they're gonna find who's behind that shadow, Hisako's gonna have to face her fears. And with Mei being curious about the whole blood pact thing, she asks Nico more about it. So Nico tells her that she's heard rumors of a cult that does rituals with blood. They have secret chambers hidden in what looks like regular office buildings. One theory says they gather to experiment, to learn. They call themselves Homo Superior, mutants. And she goes on to tell Mei that this cult believes that they are the next stage in evolution, and their sigil looks just like what Nico saw on Hisako's Omamori. And a long time ago, Nico's grandmother, who was obsessed with this cult, she made a ton of notes about them, and Nico read them all, but for the longest time she had thought it all been a myth. So after hearing all this, Mei gets super hyped, and she's like, okay, we gotta fight a whole army of people with powers just like us, and we're gonna need a name. So eventually she comes up with the name of the X-Men, almost like it's their secret society, which will include the two of them, obviously, as well as Hisako and Nico's other friends, Mori and Natsu, which from here is the start of your X-Men and Earth 6160. And so thus getting the origin of the X-Men on this world, in addition to the hint of someone making mutants, which we got during the conversation between Kageyama and Noriko, this begins to get much crazier as we learn more about this cult, who calls themselves the Children of the Atom. And when we meet their leader, we'll find out that even he has the answer to someone. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.